Modern yoga has really become watered down. It used to be a profound spiritual science that could bring balance to the individual, but now we're seeing it as like a performance. People are pursuing asanas for the sake of Instagram likes or followers. And what I feel is missing is a really key part of taking a practice that once could completely transform the individual and is now seen as something that's more performance-based, and bringing back the roots or the spiritual heritage of this ancient system. So if you're a practitioner who's been practicing for a while and you feel like there's something missing still from your practice, or maybe you're just starting out and you know that there's a deeper aspect to this journey that maybe you're missing, stick around because I have some things that I want to share with you in this video that are in relationship to the deeper traditional elements and the knowledge that is based in the spiritual sciences of yoga and tantra. In this video, I want to share with you what I see as the map of the journey. And really, this map has helped me understand in my own process of practicing for the past 10 years and also teaching how to address each of the layers of the individual. I've worked with hundreds of students over the years. I used to have a yoga school in Arizona. Now I live in Costa Rica where I run teacher training programs. And this understanding of I'm calling it the map, right, is really key to bringing ourselves into a deeper relationship to not only our body and our mind, but also the world around us. So let's get into understanding this map. And I want to start by just saying thank you for joining me. I really am grateful to share what I've learned over this decade of practice and study. And my intention is to inspire and empower you as a practitioner to go a little deeper so that you can receive the incredible benefits that this spiritual science can offer. So let's get into it, okay? So I want to give you an overview of what I'm calling the map. This map is in relationship to what I call the elemental model. The elemental model deals with 5 great elements: earth, water, fire, air, and space. And these elements come from a spiritual science known as Samkhya. Samkhya is like the ancient wisdom tradition that really yoga has birthed out of. I could share more about Samkhya, but I just want to plant the seed so that we understand that we're dealing with a spiritual science that's several thousand years old. And nowadays people are coming to yoga and they see asana as stretching, or they see breathwork as pranayama. This is really just a surface level understanding of what I consider to be a supreme spiritual technology. Now, what do I mean by that? And why is that important for you? Well, supreme technology. Now, what do we mean when we say supreme technology? I think that there's something really powerful about the human mind and the human nervous system. And maybe you agree, or maybe you feel that. And I think that there are ways to access the deeper powers and the deeper dormant forces inside of us. The yogis talked about this and they used a term known as kundalini. I'm not going to get into kundalini in this video, but the idea is that there's an evolutionary force inside of all of us, and this evolutionary force actually wants us to succeed. It wants us to evolve. It wants us to become. And, you know, if we look at the tradition of Tantra talks about how the ultimate goal of human life is to become a radiant expression of the divine, right? To be completely alive, completely vibrant, completely clear, authentic. And I think that those are really, to me, those are amazing goals, right? Like, I can have all the money in the world, I can have all the material success, but if I don't feel good in myself and I'm not feeling vibrant and alive, which is something that I experienced like 10 years ago when I first quit my job. Like, I wasn't feeling alive, right? I was feeling actually very unhealthy. Well, I came to these practices to start to heal. And then as I started to heal, I learned all these amazing things that were kind of underneath the surface. And that's really what I'm intending to share by walking you through this map, is looking at, wow, okay, there's many layers of me, right? There's many layers of you. It's not just a physical body. There's the breath, there's the mind, there's the emotions. And when we look at the elemental model and the 5 elements, and we start to interact with them and build relationship to them, that's what I feel is the missing ingredient in modern yoga. Is usually we're approaching the sadhana, the practice, from a kind of a a Western lens, right? Where we just look at one piece of it. It's the same thing when we're trying to lengthen a muscle. We try to lengthen just our hamstrings, for example, not realizing that the hamstrings are actually connected to a whole chain of fascia that runs across the backside of the body. And that to lengthen the hamstrings, we actually have to learn how to move the energy along that entire fascial chain. So that's just one example. I can use other examples like looking at how breath work is becoming conflated and people are thinking that breath work is pranayama, but really we're looking at the way to master energy, right? When we're talking about pranayama, we're talking about regulating the flow of energy. This helps us to master the mind. It helps us to gain control over the autonomic functions of the nervous system. These are really key pieces of the puzzle that I think are often missing. And I like to say that I'm here to demystify yoga to remystify yoga. You know what I mean? Like, this is a seriously mystical path, right? Of like talking about spirituality and energy and things like that that are woo-woo. But if we look at what's happening, at least in my opinion, if I just observe, there's a lot more happening than just what meets the eye. So that's just kind of like, you know, I'm just building some context to hopefully inspire you to, you know, like start to think more holistically, I guess you could say, about this incredible science. And there's many other videos on my YouTube channel that you can watch where I go into this. But in this video, I'm going to get into the earth, the water, the fire, the air, and the space. So let's start by talking about earth. When we're talking about earth, we're talking about the physical body, right? And one of the best ways to develop the physical body is through the asanas. However, asanas are not just stretching. They're not just stretching because they actually deal with how the energy is flowing in a shape. Okay, so if I put myself in a shape, for example, and my body is limited in that shape, like the movement is restricted, that posture is mirroring to me what's happening in my inner world. The posture is like, how do I say, like an antenna for information to be received. And the best way you can kind of understand this is if I'm in a hunched over position and I'm closed versus in a more upright and open position, the difference in the hormones that are being released in the circulation pathways of blood and those hormones flowing through my body is different. That changes what I'm thinking about. The significance of that when we're talking about posture training or asanas is that the asanas start to create a reflection of a state of being that we are starting to embody. So when I'm training my posture and I'm doing all these asanas, I'm not just stretching my body, I'm actually developing, let's say, a coherence between my current state and some sort of state that I'm becoming, okay? And to kind of conclude that thought so that that really lands for you, it's not so important to do a bunch of different shapes, but what is important is to do whatever shapes you're doing really, really well and pay attention to how your breath is flowing, how the energy is flowing, and what you're thinking about as you're practicing those shapes. That turns stretching into asana. Asana is really referring more to a state of being and how I'm holding myself than it does stretching my hamstrings. You know, I just keep using that as an example, but I think you get the point. So that's just a brief look at the earth element. And last thing I'll say is this earth element idea is we look at the principles and the characteristics or the qualities of the earth element, and we look at, okay, are those qualities things that I am desiring in my life? Are those qualities that would be beneficial for me to cultivate? Things like stability, groundedness, integration. When I look at the qualities of the element, I start to tune into an archetypal force, right? Like a universal force. And that universal force is a behavior pattern, or more so like a state of being that I can start to embody and develop. So that's kind of one of the ways that we look at working with the earth element and working with asanas. Moving on now to the element of water, we're talking about this quality of being, right? Again, the archetypal force of water is flow, adaptability, right? It's like, this is often connected to our emotions. And what sometimes I see is that people's emotions end up getting stuck in them and they're not able to flow through them. And that internalization of the emotional energy creates constriction and tension, and sometimes leads to health problems and all sorts of different things that don't feel so good. You know what I mean? So when we're talking about the element of water, we're talking about flow, adaptability. The way that we develop this in practice is through the vinyasas and through transitions. And there's, I believe, a way that we can cultivate a competency in us to adapt, right? Like that we can flow between a shape and another shape. And this is what we call a vinyasa. And the important thing to realize, I think, about that is to not be stiff, right? To not be rigid. We can be firm and stable, which is what the earth element helps us develop, but to create with that stability and that firmness, the capacity to flow and change forms, change shapes. And this way of thinking about vinyasa and integrating the element of water into our practice is one of the ways that has helped me, and I think that can help you if you start to look at, okay, how are my transitions in my postures? How am I moving from one shape to another? How am I moving from my inhale to my exhale? And to start to smooth that transition space out to make it more fluid. That, I believe, helps to cultivate this competency, or these competencies related to the element of water, and apply them not only in our practice, but to bring our practice into our life. So that's water. Now let's look at the element of fire. The element of fire refers to the state of matter when it changes between one state and another. This is a little woo-woo, but stay with me. We're talking about when matter increases in its temperature and it reaches a certain temperature, it starts to change forms. Now, how does that apply in ourself? Well, the way I look at fire and the way I apply fire in my personal life and also in my teaching, and so for you, if you want to apply this, you think about the consistency of effort. And I often use this analogy where I'm rubbing my hands together because there's friction. This is creating heat. And the consistency of the rub, right, applying a certain effort for long enough starts to increase the heat. And if the heat reaches a certain point, there's a combustion, there's a change in state of matter. This is transformation. And if we understand transformation, we can really start to understand what we're doing in our spiritual, I call it laboratory, right? Like when you're practicing every day, there should be a thought, or there can be a thought. I would invite there to be a thought to think about, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? What's the point of this? And even if it is just to lengthen the hamstrings, there's still a certain amount of effort and a consistency of that effort that needs to be applied for long enough for the hamstrings to lengthen, for the state of that matter in their stiff position, right? If we're talking about the hamstrings, I keep using this as an analogy, but I think it makes sense. There needs to be enough energy applied to that stiffness until it loosens up and changes into length. So think about that. That's like a general principle, but I think it can be really helpful at understanding how the element of fire works in our practice. Now we get to the element of air. The element of air connects to the breath. And when we're talking about the breath, we're here in the heart. Okay, so if you're following along, these also connect to the chakras. So we've made our way up. Now we're here at Anahata chakra. The heart and the lungs are connected. This is really the place of circulation in our body. So we breathe in, and that air comes into our lungs, and the heart actually circulates the oxygen through the body, through the blood. If the element of air is impaired, meaning that wind is not flowing optimally in our body, then the circulation pathways are in some way obstructed. This inhibits not only how our body communicates with itself, because communication is often connected to the element of air, but it also inhibits how our body communicates with our environment. That communication or lack of communication leads to many different problems, right? Problems in our relationships, problems in our body's relationship with itself, right? These are things that, like, if we start to look at them in this way, and I'm hoping that I'm starting to make sense about how we start to look at all the different layers and how they fit together, right? So if we're looking at the breath and we're looking at how am I breathing, right? Is my breath flowing or is it constricted? Is it held? When the breath is constricted or held, there's really an inability to release and circulate, right? Like literally speaking, circulate, but also circulate, like energetically allow energy to move and flow internally and externally. So that's like a intro, right, to talking about breath. And I want to say briefly about the difference between breath work and pranayama, because I talked about it earlier. Breath work, right, the respiratory activity of breathing, connecting that to the energetic activity that's happening underneath the breath process, this is how we start to transform breath work into pranayama. And I think that this is one of the main missing pieces of the puzzle with people who are doing a lot of breath work practice, but are lacking the energetic substrate or the energetic, I don't know how to call it, like the map underneath the physical of how the energy is flowing. And this is where we introduce bandhas. When we start to introduce bandhas into our breathing practice, that's when we can transform breath work into a very powerful, energetic cultivation process where now we're harnessing the life force, we're guiding it, we're directing it, and we're channeling it in the direction that we want it to go. Because the wind, the air element, it just wants to expand, it wants to be free, it wants to go in all these different directions. It's just like the mind. It's so hard to get the mind to hold still. So in order to master the element of air, we have to start to control the breath, but on a deeper level, control the energy beneath the breath. Hey, real quick, if this is inspiring to you and you want to put it all together, I've put together a PDF guide. It has video links in it. There's practices, there's techniques, there's even a self-diagnosis, which helps to identify what's going on internally and build a practice around that. You can get it by going over to the link in the description. Again, it's absolutely free, and I just wanted to make it as easy as possible for you to integrate all of these incredible teachings into your daily life and your daily practice. So be sure to grab it through the link in the description. But let's get back into the elements. So that's the element of air. Now let's talk about the element of space. Space connects to the sense of hearing. It's related to sound. It's the subtlest of the elements. It's often the most difficult to connect to. Obviously, the physical body is far more obvious and here than this element of space. Well, when it comes to space, the key in what I've noticed about connecting to this element is that we have to start to tune in to our ears. We have to start to listen. And that listening goes far beyond what we hear in the external realm, right? The sounds around us. Like my neighbors just started playing some loud techno music. I don't know if you can hear it. But the hearing starts to turn inward. And by directing our sense of hearing inward and listening to our body, like actually listening to what is my body communicating, we start to tune into a really ancient intelligence, an intelligence that's far older than language, right? Because the brain, it's like 2 million years old. This brain here in our skull, the human brain, but the intelligence in all of the systems in the body is way older than 2 million years, right? This body has evolved for a long time. So there are systems of intelligence that we are starting to tune into, and that's really what we're doing by looking at all these different elements and the archetypal forces that relate to them. We're tuning into forces of intelligence, cosmic forces that are kind of like natural laws, if you will, right? Like principles of existence, principles of life. And when it comes to the element of space, this really subtle quality of space, right? It's the space that all things are birthed into, right? From space, things become. And without space, nothing can happen. And, I could talk about how creation and this idea of creativity and inspiration, in order for it to come, we need space. There needs to be silence, stillness, a place for that inspiration, that creativity to land. I could talk about that, but I think you know what I mean. I want to share with you the key technique from the yoga science that I think is really helpful at connecting to the space. It's known as kumbhaka. Kumbhaka is the term given to breath retention. But kumbhaka, it doesn't mean breath retention. The word kumbh means vessel. And what we're talking about when we're talking about kumbhaka, although it relates and refers to retaining the breath or holding the breath, it's also relating to the kumbh, the vessel. And when we hold the breath either in, if I hold the breath in at the top, or I hold the breath out at the bottom, there's an idea that there's a vessel, there's a kumbh of the body that's holding the energy. Because remember what we talked about, how breath and energy are not the same. They're connected, but they're not the same. We're also talking about how to create a vessel for the energy. That's what we do with kumbhaka. So looking at when you're performing your breathwork practices, and given all the things that we talked about, how to create a stable yet relaxed, right, earth and water, a stable but flowing position, so that the transformation, the fire, right, can start to burn, the air can circulate internally, and there's a space that's holding it all. That's what we do when we work with kumbhaka. If you want to learn more about kumbhaka, be sure to check out one of the other videos on my channel where I go into the secrets of kumbhaka and pranayama. But for now, just kind of like let that seed plant and thinking about how to create a space for myself when I'm practicing so that the energy can flow without disturbance, I guess you could say, without the imposition of the mind. That's what we're starting to look at when we're diving into more of the subtleties that deal with the element of space. So those are the 5 elements that I just walked you through and the map that we're calling the elemental model. The last thing I'll share as like kind of a recap, right, is looking at, okay, my body is comprised of these 5 fundamental forces, comes from Samkhya, an ancient system of wisdom science. Yoga and the practices of things like asana or breathing or meditation, they're all part of a holistic way of developing the individual so that as an individual I can feel connected to and harmonious as a part of the whole. That's the path that we're on, and that's really how, in my opinion, we can start to address all of the different things or imbalances or problems that we might experience as humans and as individuals, and start to address them systematically and intelligently and with inspiration, like a understanding of, okay, this is actually what I am doing. If this is landing for you and you want to begin a journey with working with the elements, you can download the free PDF. It's over at my website at the Bhuta Yoga Academy. If you put in your email, you'll get an email each day along with the PDF guide where we walk you through each of the elements and talk about tools and techniques and ways to really, I call it self-diagnose, right? To understand what's going on and how to address those things that are going on. So if that's inspiring, go check it out. But other than that, I just want to say thank you for joining me. It's been an honor to share with you these incredible spiritual sciences that have helped me so much and helped so many other people to transform their lives. And be sure to hit the subscribe button because more videos will be coming out on these topics. So if you enjoy them, I will see you very soon. Have a beautiful day and go enjoy this amazing life.